We're going to start in just 1 minute. I appreciate everybody being here. We have a skeleton crew here in this room due to some weather constraints and some roadway constraints, but we're going to start in just 1 minute and appreciate your patience. And I see you all online here, so thanks for being with us. All right, we're going to start. People are joining us online and in the room, slowly trickling in. Like I said, we had a little bit of a delay. There was a roadway closure on 84 this morning, making it a challenge for folks to get in. But we're so glad that you've joined us online, and we're going to start by hearing from the folks from CPTC. So you want to kick us off? I don't know, Jim, are you going to be leading
Yeah, well,
charge today?
I'll definitely kick things off, and it looks like we have a bunch of people here. Uh,
Great.
Awesome. So I just want to really start my comments by saying I got a bad draw at the other public hearing. I think I came in at 101. So that's a big effort. So I didn't make the public hearing. So I do want to just touch base on two quick bills that I would have talked about had it not been 101. But again, luck of the draw. So I do want to just talk about Senate Bill 237. I'm not going to say anything that has probably been repeated the other night. I just want to point out two stats that I think are critical to 237. The Waterbury branch, of which I'm fortunate, I'm always careful. I see Representative Gravalu Berger here. I'm not pitting one branch against another, but I do want to mention that as the Waterbury branch, they received a 44% increase in service uh, back in 2023. And with that 44% increase in service, it made it the first branch that exceeded its pre-COVID ridership. And where it stands today, less than 3 years later, it's almost 150% of its pre-COVID ridership. I mean, it's just crushing it from a ridership perspective, and certainly the additional services is a lot. The second thing I would add is a few years back, the shoreline needs got an additional $5 million, and service showed an immediate 28% increase on the shoreline needs. Listen, I'm just going to be honest. At the core of it all, I'm not a train expert. I don't profess to be, no stats and figures, but I do know this: steady service builds ridership. There's nothing truer in public transportation than that. And what they're doing to the shoreline east, not giving it 100% service, cutting service away, just is not a way to build a line. And then they decry when they talk about the lack of ridership. So I would just tell you, listen, I'm appointed by the governor on this commission. So I mean, not only on this, but CPTC. So I've been a strong supporter. But on this one, the administration, in my opinion, just gets it wrong. And so I do think we need to build investment there. Another part of 237 I just want to talk about real quick is the expansion of the Danbury line to New Milford. Certainly, I don't think that gets a lot of. I'm a big proponent of the expansion of rail there. Also, I would point out that I think expanding rail on the Waterbury line from Waterbury to Hartford would be also in that. And Waterbury to Hartford, connecting two of our 5 biggest cities via rail, I think would be admirable as well. There's busing and transit enhancements in 237, which I support as well. Real quick, moving into Senate Bill 9, I would just say that microtransit, I speak about this from a Valley person. I live in Derby. We have the Valley Transit District. They have the VTD to go app. The microtransit service on one of that pilot program is successful. It's an easy ride-share alternative. My only frustration at times is I get it's not a morning service because I have another service, but I do think that would be pretty cool if we can expand that for the weekends. So big supporter there. That's all I'll say about all the amazing testimony you already heard about transit bills and public transportation bills. I just want to give you a sense of our year, and then I'll certainly open it up to other people. We had, I think, a very successful year from a Connecticut Public Transportation Commission perspective. Now we continue to meet with Department of Transportation once a quarter, and their meetings are robust and they put a fair amount of effort into it. Our executive committee meets monthly with CDOT and the executive board. We were meeting with Ben Limmer. I think today might be our first meeting with the new public bureau chief as an executive board committee, and so I look forward to that. That is always awesome and helpful. So I will say that those meetings are helpful. I still aspire to have a little bit more give and take. For instance, just one small example. What I mean, so there's a tremendous gap on the Hartford Yard Go games and transit, and we continue to make suggestions. But at the end of the day, like the shoreline needs, they are set on what they're going to do. They're not super interested in my opinion, making the effort to try to hear some of the feedback they get from our consumers, like the Hartford Yard Go. So I think that would be the next step for improving the relationship. Also, from a year we've met and we continue to be hybrid. Next month we'll have our Shoreline East meeting up in New London. The month after that we'll get out to Metro North. I will tell you that we continue to struggle with hybrid meetings. We continue to have a patchwork of equipment from council members who bring their laptops and hope that some of the sites we meet at have professional technical capabilities. But if they don't, it's rough. We are a state organization that operates haphazardly when it comes to the technology and not very professional or efficient. And that's because, again, we cobble together technological needs that we have with duct tape and string. So that continues to be an area for improvement. The last thing I would say about our year is that with the upcoming session, we will continue to push for expanded service on the Shoreline East. They're doing everything they're being asked to do. They're transit-oriented development. They're getting riders. And this administration is just absolutely positively digging down on doing anything helpful for that line. It's like the harder we push, the more they push back. It's not good government. I would tell you that we continue to advocate for fare free busing. One of my biggest challenges, and this is where I leave my comments, is it has been eye opening for me in the last year. The single most eye opening thing for me has been a lot of initiatives we do. We've been fortunate to have those people who have ADA compliant needs on our council. It's been a life lesson for me. And what I have learned is in most cases, ADA compliancy is an afterthought. It is an afterthought on communication. It is an afterthought on signage. It is an afterthought on service. It is an afterthought on maintenance. ADA compliance is just an afterthought, and that's one of my biggest lessons in last year. So that's my story. I want to certainly we have a number of council members who may want to jump in. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Jim. And we'll definitely have some questions, but happy to have others sort of speak up and give their viewpoints that are part of the council on the various interactions you've had with your constituency. You're really such a great liaise group between those who are riding both buses and the rails, as well as the administration and the DOT. So we appreciate everything you're doing, and we really want to hear what you're hearing out there so that we can, do better. I know last year, you mentioned some of the things that we put into place, hearing from the Connecticut Public Transportation Council around technology, making sure we're noticing meetings properly so that we can get more involvement. Doesn't sound like we're quite there yet. We have some ways to go, but, together we can make these modifications, similarly with Shoreline East and busing, by adding bus riders, and their ability to voice their thoughts and opinions through the Public Transportation Council. I think we've opened up, those lines of communications between those public transit riders and not only DOT, but certainly with us, and understanding what the needs are of those riders and that ridership. So I'm just grateful for all you do. And I find these informational hearings really important to our process. And to keeping in communication and understanding exactly what's going on, because as we know, a lot of these folks are working and taking public transportation to work, to and from, and it makes it very difficult for them to get up here and testify, for things that they'd like to see us do better. So we really rely on you and your testimony today. So I don't know who wants to speak next, but we'd love to hear from you.
I'll go. Good morning. It's nice to see all of you. I'm sorry that we're not in person. This is one of my favorite meetings that we have all year as a council. So just to kind of reiterate what Jim said, obviously with SB 9, our main concern is making sure, and we know that, I think we all are in agreement that we don't want microtransit to be cutting into fixed route service. And so just being very mindful of that in terms of, not duplicating routes that we already have with fixed route, or kind of, making what is a great service kind of more attractive than using our wonderful Connecticut transit system. Our member, Philip Magelnick, is not here today, but he and I have been partnered together on the council's strategic planning initiatives around ADA compliance. And I do want to share that we have had some really impactful meetings with the agency, specifically with leaders like Lisa Rivers and the Connecticut Transit folks around ADA accessibility, in terms of making sure that bus operators are using the voice systems to alert visually impaired people about bus arrivals, stops, and departures. We also, as a council, raised concerns with the agency around their reporting system and complaint system. At this point, I believe that they've got like anywhere between, I think, 5 and 6 different streams where complaints can come in to the agency and then are kind of handled based on where they come in and, whether or not something is handled by, a CT Transit operator versus CT Transit itself versus Connecticut DOT. And so as a council, we have asked them to really dig into that system and kind of have a better communicable way to explain to us, like when someone comes in with a complaint, what does that process look like from start to finish? And this is not to say that they're not doing this, but in terms of people whose experiences are impacted because of disabilities that they live with, their failure is not an acceptable answer. And so, those things need to be correctly and quickly fixed. The other issue that, hopefully in another few weeks we don't have to think about is snow removal and the impact of that on all of our transit users. The storm in January that left us with about a foot of snow that then did not melt. You would have to be kind of willfully not seeing the people standing in the road or on top of 3.5 foot snowbanks waiting for buses. And while we don't have a consistent amount of snow year to year, we need to have consistent policies that support our transit users. And that whole process felt a lot like the three Spider-Men all pointing at each other in terms of who's ultimately responsible for snow removal. And so I know as a council, the part of that we will be trying to take ownership of is bringing into conversation the COGs as representatives of the municipalities, to kind of figure out how, is it a carrot versus stick? Do they need support in terms of, what are the fine structures for property owners who are not clearing their shelters, but also that DOT and departments of public work are part of those conversations as well, because maybe it needs to be a different plowing procedure specific to around those shelters. So that way they can be cleared quickly and efficiently. Let's see. I'm going to pause for a second and look at my notes. I apologize. Jim is correct. We are very excited to report that the council has a website hosted by the agency. We provide them with our agendas and our meeting minutes, and they post that, and that has been a big help for us in terms of the administrative lift. But out of our own pockets, we've purchased like a first generation meeting owl that is, works-ish for our in-person meetings. And so Jim is absolutely correct that it is, you know, it's a struggle to kind of get these, and it is highly dependent on kind of whatever the setup of our host is. And because we want to be in the community to be able to listen to transit users' feedback, that is something that does kind of remain a challenge. And then, yeah, that's it. It's wonderful to see all of you, and I will defer to any other of my fellow council members on their stuff. Thank you.
And I just want to say, Kate saying that I'm right twice in a 60-second period. That's awesome. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Kate. I really appreciate your feedback, and I know Jim does too, clearly. Yeah, certainly the snow removal. We've had, an extreme year in terms of weather conditions, but you're right, that can't be an excuse. So we need to make sure that folks still have access, and that they're not put in dangerous situations, whether they're on top of a snowbank or I was seeing people out in the roads. And the roads already, right, become narrowed after a snowfall because there's so much snow and nowhere for it to go. So we need to make sure that we're looking at protocol there. And I think working with the COGs is the right way to go. Municipal leaders and their public works departments are constantly working on this too, and need to be aware of the public transit stops. So appreciate your work there. Anybody else want to speak up from the council?
Good morning, members of the committee, and thank you for having us. My name is Chance Carter, and I am the second vice chair of CPTC. I am a lifelong Harvardite, so I'd like to welcome you all back into the capital city for another session. Unfortunately, we aren't able to join you, but I hope that y'all are enjoying all that the city has to offer, including all the snow that's melting. I would like to echo comments made by Kate about snow removal. I do think that something that has become more apparent, especially um, seeing all the snow this past winter is just getting some coordination, especially with our state partners, especially here in the city. We have a lot of state properties, and a lot of them are home to a lot of state employees and visitors that need state services. And sometimes it's those properties are the ones that are a bit more difficult to access in snow, especially along our state roads. Sometimes we end up having some state roads that are very delayed in getting sidewalks even cleared to allow residents and visitors of the city to even access bus stops. So I would love to see more of a concerted effort from that from all involved stakeholders. I also am very happy to see the work that Conduct has done around bus shelters, and we now have a bus shelter uh, enhancement plan and plan to actually provide more across the state, which is very important, especially as we see how changing climate conditions have been impacting the state and its residents, and seeing CONDOT work with COGS and municipalities to develop maintenance agreements around keeping those shelters nice and maintained is something that I hope could be a model for looking at snow removal. Uh, we're also happy to see the inclusion of bus transit and the transit bill that we're looking at, SB9, specifically looking at the expansion of a fast track light service to connect to Yukon and to communities east of the river. As someone that lives in the north end of Hartford and looking with anticipation to seeing the investments the state is looking into for improving Interstate 84 and 91 through the city. We hope and urge that transit is also included with those record investments that are being planned, especially considering the impact that construction of these major arteries through the capital region will have, specifically in the capital city. We live in a state that has a shifting population. We have a population that's getting older. We're trying to attract younger folks and trying to find ways to improve transit and to make transit more accessible, more frequent, and more easily accessible to all residents is something that we should all be prioritizing. And with that, I will pause.
I appreciate that. Hi, Representative Amy Berger Travallo. I was not here at the beginning, the first few minutes, which I would love for you guys to advocate for an immediate implementation of rail along the 84 corridor. Thank you very much. Then I would not have had a 2-hour ride in. No, I'm really, really glad to hear you guys talking sort of cohesively about the snow situation. I don't think anybody can deny that we're going to be facing a lot more extreme weather, snow, extreme heat, which will also be something that is going to affect transit riders. Have you guys thought about what ideally this could look like with all of the I love a good Marvel reference, with all of the 3 Spider-Men pointing at one another, Kate? Have you thought about what that could really look like ideally, what you'd like to see?
I'll take that one since it was in my my comment. I would love to see kind of a robust conversation amongst the stakeholders involved in this. And so, we can't get 169 municipalities to show up to a Zoom meeting. And so that's why I feel like kind of tackling it at the COG level would be the most impactful. And then I think it needs to be CT Transit and CT DOT. In a perfect world, the Connecticut Public Transportation Council wouldn't need to be driving this conversation, but on behalf of the users, I feel like we need to make sure that it's happening. And so if it happens, within the context of our agenda for this next year. But I think that instead of trying to create 169 unique solutions to address this issue, kind of having a template that can work in different contexts, like, our more urban, bus stops, ones that are into our more suburban areas. Obviously, we don't have transit connections into our rural areas, but having something that kind of gives municipalities a very easy plug and play, expectation of what happens in these storms. We put so much effort on clearing the roads for people who are using personal motor vehicles, and it should not be a hierarchy that centers those users and those users only.
Thank you for that. I think the collaboration is going to be key for sure, and I do believe that when we're centering the vehicle, the people who are driving their cars, we're also ignoring the fact that we're putting pedestrians right in their line as we're not clearing, or it's certainly something that we've all seen just in the last 2 weeks. I know I've had to hit my brakes a number of times, and not even just in urban spaces. This is in the suburbs as well. So to be able to look at it from a space where all 169 towns have options, I think is definitely the key. So thank you for that. With that, my co-chair is back in the room, and if you have anything that you'd like to add.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for that. And like I said, it's important for us to sort of understand, that definitely unusual circumstances this winter, but we need to be prepared regardless. And so I appreciate you highlighting that. Also, we heard, you mentioned Shoreline East, Jim, at the top of the testimony. We're always trying to improve access to public transit options across the state, enhance access, enhance the experience, ridership experience, both on buses and on the rails. I'm curious, we heard a lot more, I think that the folks that are in it recognize that we'd like Shoreline East to be more effective and provide more connectivity, both going westbound towards New York City, but also certainly going eastbound. And I think we heard more about that than ever, in this public hearing, particularly in light of hiring going on at some of the larger manufacturing companies like EB in New London. We heard from students. And actually received testimony, not only, the public hearing testimony that you may have heard from a Conn College student, but we received information and more written testimony from folks saying, don't forget about the other colleges along this route, as you go up that way, in addition to the Coast Guard and folks who really want the ability to be able to get from point A to point B without having to use their vehicles. And I just wondered if you're seeing that. I know traditionally you guys do such good work, and it's always about raising awareness that you're in existence so folks can come to you to help them advocate for their needs, their public transit needs. But I'm just wondering if you're hearing from folks particular to this line and particularly going eastbound, because we did hear also from the commissioner that it's likely that another yard would be needed, especially if we were going to go into Rhode Island. There is sort of this renewed vigor to expand into Rhode Island from the Rhode Island administration, the governor and lieutenant governor, but as well from some folks in the Senate there. So I just wondered if you could speak to that a little bit.
I would say a few things on my end from that. It was interesting. You usually have been doing advocacy work amongst a lot of different hats through the years, and you could usually tell the passion involved by the amount of people who come to your meetings, who come to your forums, who come to your public hearings. So I would tell you that each year that we have our Shoreline East meetings are more and more people who come, and that's very visible. So yes, I definitely feel that there continues to be greater momentum each year. And that highlights itself both in the public testimony, the amount of it received, who it came from, and then who will be at our March meeting. Because each meeting gets higher. The second thing I would say is that, to your point, what was really cool, our last Shoreline East meeting, we had folks from Rhode Island come to our meeting. We had a state, I think, one state rep and one state senator from Rhode Island come to our meeting, which is pretty cool, right? And so we are seeing Rhode Island, have that interest, and it's kind of a really cool regional thing to do. I talked to a lot of folks. We all do a Shoreline East, and I would tell you that although they love the connection to Rhode Island, I think they would really start with steady, everyday service, reliable, consistent service. Schedule's brutal for them. But yeah, to your point, definitely seeing more advocacy.
Appreciate that. And also, just want to highlight, because I think we need to talk about ADA compliance more. And I appreciate your, both Jim and Kate, you highlighting some of those concerns. And Chance, I'm sorry, I had to run out to vote in another committee when you were speaking. So you may have spoken about it as well. But I think we need to, like you said, we clearly need to do better. We're not doing enough. And I'd like to see, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what we could do on our end to help those efforts. Certainly, particularly now that we do have microtransit, I'm hearing more and more from the disability community about their ability to get around using microtransit, that it had been a little bit more difficult because, microtransit provides them sort of the ability to call this on-demand service to come to their house and then take them to where they need to go. So that's fantastic for the disability community. But there's a lot of riders, as you point out, that are trying to use our rail system, our CT Transit, other transit district buses on fixed route service, and don't have the proper tools and resources available. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I won't put you on the spot today unless you want to comment on what we could do as your legislative partners to help that along. This is obviously compliance with federal law is incredibly important here, and we should highlight that. But we also have the ability as a state to do better in following federal law, and can even make enhancements as a state to those federal requirements. So if you have thoughts, I'm happy to have you share them, but I did just want to throw that out there, that I'd like to continue that conversation and make sure that we're addressing the needs of our disability community.
So I'm happy to jump in on that one again, because this is the part that Phil and I have been working together on. Part of our meeting with the agency was around what the training protocols are for drivers and maintenance in the Connecticut transit kind of universe, and how the agency can have all of these really wonderful and like necessary things that they want to do, but if that's kind of getting lost in translation at the operator level, that's where these failures are happening on a day-to-day basis for our transit users. And so in our conversations with them, and again, Phil is such a powerhouse in this space, and has really done an amazing job of educating, both people on the council, but also kind of anyone that we encounter. What the agency seems to be committed to be doing is to update their training protocols and to kind of build in more accountability to make sure that, you've got CT Transit, then you have the private operators that operate under CT Transit. And so how are you making sure that the driver that's under this umbrella over here is being completely compliant and doing all the things? And so I don't know that in this moment there is a legislative need to kind of add extra things, except that, as an agency, I think kind of the best thing that you can do to support these efforts wholesale is to make sure that the STF kind of stays protected and funded so that they have the money that they need to be able to do all of the things they need to do. And so I appreciate the offer, and I don't think that they're in any way trying to skirt their federal and state obligations. But it's a human thing, and they're trying to make sure they address the human aspect of it with robust training and accountability and compassion.
If I could just jump, I don't, and I agree with everything he said. If I could just jump into one thing I thought to myself, that would be helpful in this area, because for me, it was just awareness. It was having the Phil or the Al, Sylvester get on board, but I really think we probably don't have enough. And I know it's not a legislative fix, but my guess is the Department of Transportation does not have enough people in leadership who actually do struggle with ADA compliancy. And it's been my observation that when you have people at the head or people who are in leadership positions who go through struggles, they're more aware of it and they're more likely to push that and get knocked out. So I think it would be helpful. I know it's not a legislative fix, but to have more people in leadership who acutely understand this by living it daily.
The other thing I will say is that Phil has gathered some really kind of tough to watch video footage of his experience. He and his wife are both have a visual disability, of their experience of trying to find the right bus when you are in a bus kind of spot. Like, so if you have a bunch of buses that all come into one bus stop, if you can't see the bus number on the front of the bus and you need to go to each bus and listen or ask the driver to tell you if that's the correct bus. And if the buses don't automatically kind of see someone waiting to get on the bus, then they will depart. And so he's collected footage of that experience, which I would love to share with the council or with your committee. And then there's another user who was very generous in sharing their experience of being a power wheelchair user. The bus stop that he was trying to access is up on a grassy curb that has no curb cuts or sidewalk. And so he had his wheelchair in an area where he could safely wait for the bus, and the bus driver refused to pick him up. It turned into an extended kind of situation between the two of them because she felt like she needed to get permission from the agency. And so the video itself is, quite long, about 10 minutes or so, of her refusing to just drive forward a little bit to pick him up. And then when she does finally get permission from her CT Transit line of command there, he recorded the rest of the ride where it was uncomfortable for him because the operator kept saying things about that experience. And so I'm happy to share that as well. I think Jim, I'll say it again, Jim loves hearing it. Jim is absolutely right. If you're not living this experience, it's very hard to kind of understand the gravity of not being able to independently move around and how destabilizing that is. And so I think those videos will be helpful for you all to kind of give you that perspective. I wish that we didn't have to kind of see things to believe and feel them and kind of work to fix them, but those are all helpful tools. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. And I'm sure that's really tough to watch, but also very important. And so grateful to him for recording some of those experiences and sharing his lived experiences. And yes, I would be interested in that. I see Senator Wong and Rep Farrar both have questions. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to the council. Miss seeing everybody in person, but and thank you all for the great work that you all do. One question is, Chairwoman Cohen has been a remarkable and tireless advocate for Shoreline East, and she's persuaded me to be a big supporter of it as well. But I think it's for me, the question is much broader, that we should not only be supporting Shoreline East, that we should support all of our rail lines. And I represent one of the busiest major corridors, economic corridors, the New Haven into New York line, that also could seek improvement and funding support. So what would you say in regards to an overall budgetary commitment in transportation to improve our rail services not only in addition to Shoreline East, but throughout, and also then adding the idea of lines into our Danbury and Waterbury lines to really kind of take cars off our roads. I think it's an issue of a philosophical and a priority commitment to increase utilization and support of our rail services.
I mean, I'll see that. Doug hasn't said much, and I certainly want to make sure that Doug has the opportunity to talk for certain. But I will just tell you, from an overall rail perspective, I still think that what we hear from the daily commuter outside of the shoreline, truthfully, is just a desire to improve their day-to-day experience, and that I think is as simple as positive on time, positive experiences, safe experiences. So I still think from a New Haven line, the time for Connecticut, the initiative that's being funded and put in place to reduce the time that it takes to get from New Haven to Grand Central. I would tell you from a budgetary perspective, I still think that's probably the most significant impact of the day-to-day rail user outside of Shoreline East. Because at the end of the day, for the most part, they have plenty of service. They have 100% service. In the case of Waterbury branch, they have 144% of the previous service. So I still think it's that day-to-day experience. And then here's what I would tell you is really difficult for the day-to-day commuter, especially down here, to your point, Center along down in the Fairfield County, is the absolute difficulty you have getting on a wait list or parking permit list in some of these areas is difficult as well. So I would tell you from a day-to-day perspective, I still think it's about the day-to-day experience. Shoreline East is a different animal that's on schedule.
What kind of input do you have as we've now passed legislation to allow many of our municipalities to now run parking authorities and the dynamic change in that? Have they been responsive to your council? Our municipalities been responsive to your council's input and maintenance and feedback from riders?
I would say that's not a pool we've put our foot in a lot, to be honest with you.
Okay. Well, then here's a second question that I wonder if you want to put your dip your toes into it. One of the bills that we have had a public hearing that invoked a lot of emotion and a lot of concern is our public transit workers in regards to some of the potential danger and kind of abusive behavior that arises from our bus riders. And one of the points would be, is there any input from the Commuter Rail Council, which now manages buses, to be able to dip your toe into that and understand that issue? Or is it simply, in my conversation in the testimony with the commissioner of DOT, there's a concern about federal preemption in regards to more regulatory guidelines and that. But is there anything that the council can talk about in regards in coordination with the DOT, with a public service announcement, notices on the signage on our buses to talk about common courtesies and conduct that is appropriate? Any thoughts on that, or maybe you don't want to dip your toe into that one either?
No, I know. I just want to say one thing that you mentioned, and a lot of the testimony I hear from the Department of Transportation, there's a whole lot of obstacles of why they can't do things on the Shoreline East or else in other places. But I don't say this to be negative. I'm just a straight shooter. But man, when they had to roll out that Hartford line and they had to go up to Springfield, man, those roadblocks came out real easy. So I think they can remove roadblocks when they choose to remove roadblocks. When they don't want to remove roadblocks, like in the case of Shoreline East, they're insurmountable. And when they do want to remove obstacles, like in the Hartford line, we get through. So that's my first thought. But to your direct point, I would tell you, for us, and Chance, please, he's a way better expert than me on transit. I will tell you that we're starting to get more involved in transit. We just met with Doug up here, Doug Holcomb at the Great Hartford Transit District. So we're starting to dip our toe in there more. I think there's certain things that just appear to be no brainers to me, but then again, I'm an outsider, like the Hartford Goat and actually having transit service to connect the Hartford Goat when the games get out. To just do that just seems like a no brainer to me. I would think would be more receptive and say, "Oh yeah, wow, that's a great idea. We'll do that." So the Department of Transportation is not that type of body that says, "Wow, that's a good idea. We're going to do that." So I still think we have work to do there.
And I'll
Well, I
just
appreciate you dipping your toe, and I'd love to hear Chance's thought as well. Thank
thank you, Senator. So I am the second vice chair of the council, and I represent the views of mainly transit riders, bus transit riders. And what I will say in response to the bills that are being looked at that are trying to address some of the concerns that operators have are, in my opinion, necessary. I do believe that the that CT Transit and Condot are working on a public education campaign around courtesy on transit. I do think that it's something that is being made more apparent over the past few years. And I think that what we're seeing on transit vehicles and seeing some of the cases that we've been seeing of issues between riders and operators is a result of a few things. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that a lot of transit users are using transit to get to social services, get to mental health appointments, get to health appointments, and are trying to receive services um, that are needed, and that public transit provides a lifeline to these folks to get the support that they need. I think that more could be done to help operators understand that, and I think that it's a mutual sense of respect, and I think that most of our operators are doing a wonderful job uh, being not just navigating a massive vehicle through our streets, but also serving riders and customers with respect and with help. But I do think that more could be done just to help support folks that are trying to get support.
Thank you so much, Chance, and thank you, Senator Wong. Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, everyone. Just a couple quick questions to follow up on the discussion. Jim, you had shared at the outset, and it's come up in the discussion since, a little bit of data for, I think, the Waterbury line specifically, when increasing access, this is what we saw in ridership. If you have information like that on other lines, if you wouldn't mind just sending that to myself, and I don't know if the other committee members might be interested. I think that just could be generally helpful for us to have that type of information from you. That would be much appreciated. And then, Kate, I did have a follow-up question on the reporting system you mentioned that you all are looking into with DOT. I wanted to understand, to your point, it sounds like you're trying to just understand where feedback or complaints go, but have you also been provided any sort of data points from what is overall, kind of said through these mechanisms, and if there's any themes to some of those complaints or feedback, that would be helpful to know as well.
I will say Kate's for the win on this because we had the same thought. So
Okay.
we, as part of our conversation with the agency, we have quarterly meetings where we can request the topics that we want to hear from, and that is one that we have asked them to kind of put together in the aggregate for us, because the stories that we can learn from themes can hopefully help the overall network. The reason why this is timely is because CT Transit seems to be going through their own internal process of trying to kind of look at that whole system and kind of find efficiencies and kind of make it better. But I anticipate that this will hopefully be on our next CT Transit public meeting, or certainly no later than the summer one. And it is something that we have also requested.
Okay, thank you for that. And then finally, maybe it's going to come out in the feedback meeting related to users. I was wondering if the council ever addressed or looked into, again, it could be feedback from council members or again, feedback from users, particularly around, route design specifically. I know we often hear that from our own constituents, from getting from point A to B, especially when you're looking at certain geographic locations in the state. I know I've consistently kind of heard it from getting west, where I am in West Hartford, east to East Hartford. And I know some of that we're trying to address in one of the bills this year, but I didn't know if you all had looked specifically at the route design pieces for users.
Jim, do you mind if I take this one too? Okay. So the state of Connecticut has an absolutely wonderful advocate named Casey Morin, who I believe has probably submitted testimony to your account. He is the thought leader around the Fast Tracked East. And Casey does a tremendous, and the transportation is not Casey's day job, so it's even more impressive. But Casey has done a tremendous job of kind of looking at our systems and the routes and kind of thinking more expansively about that. Obviously, Connecticut DOT, anytime they have to, I believe, change a route, they have to do, I think, a fare study to make sure that they're not removing anything in areas of distressed municipalities or, disadvantaged communities. And so it's not something that they're able to, I think, easily or quickly pivot on. But the council or the transportation committee should definitely leverage Casey to whatever extent you can, because he's doing, I think, some of the best high level thinking about this in the state outside of someone who works for Connecticut DOT.
I'll just hop in really quickly too and just say that I love the work that Casey's been doing. He has developed a series of proposals to look at creating a statewide network that will connect pretty much every municipality within the state to each other with a bus service. But he's also been able to work with other stakeholders in the capital region. I live in Hartford and I live in the Blue Hills area, and I've been yelling about improving transit since I started taking the bus at 2. So it's been great to find him and other stakeholders so we're able to help um, put things out there. Something that I think is also needed is to look at what COGS have been doing. Like, for example, here in the capital region, we have a rapid route study that identified key bus routes in Greater Hartford and ways to improve them. And it would just be great to not just have these reports die in a file cabinet somewhere and to actually be operationalized. And I mean, even looking at ways that the state could improve their ability to help drive that is to just even look at the ways in which complete streets projects are being funded. Like, I love that we have a complete streets policy, but for example, coming into Albany Avenue from points west into the city, it's a very important bus route. We have over 10 lines running that corridor, but we have no bus lanes. And then we have a new project, we reduce the ability to even to even add them. So just to, be a little bit more, have a little bit more of a concerted effort so that way we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel sometimes would be great. Because I mean, seeing the plans for New Haven, I'm very jealous of bus lanes and would love to see them more across the state.
Thank you for all that feedback. It's super helpful. And then just one more brief comment. I know, Kate, you mentioned you're going to be doing that follow-up with suggesting there's kind of a coordinated effort around snow removal. And I just wanted to reiterate, I think, Rep. Berger-Gavallo's comments about possibly thinking about that coordination in relationship to emergency weather events overall, because I think, again, making sure we have transit members in mind with other weather events, or I think as Rep. Berger-Gavallo said, with, increasing heat. So just kind of consistently thinking about those emergency weather events, I think would be super helpful.
Absolutely. I know that we're coming quickly on time, but I wanted to make sure that my colleague Doug Houseladden, who's here, if he had anything that he had also wanted to add.
Oh, thank you, Kate, and appreciate it. I was trying to let the chairs and vice chairs speak on behalf of the council, and I'll just note that the Move New Haven study, which is bringing a lot of bus lanes to New Haven over the next 5 years, was really led by the transit district, Greater New Haven Transit District, and was led by the city of New Haven and by CT Transit and DOT. So there was a voice for the municipalities that led that study in order to drive, pardon the pun, but drive that program home. And I think, having municipalities have direct access to planning and supporting the planning operations of the DOT and the CT Transit network particularly is very important. There is direct access at transit districts that provide fixed route service. So the Greater Bridgeport Transit District does an annual comprehensive operational analysis, a COA, which is a typical transit terminology in order to change bus routing. And by having municipalities and impacted towns and cities serving on the transit district board, there's a hand in glove, a very tight relationship between municipal planning and the fixed route services. So I think one thing we still do not have, even though the Connecticut Public Transportation Council is still in its infancy here in the first 5 years, one thing we don't have is operational oversight or any governance oversight of the fixed route service that is provided by the DOT. And that is, having writers have a say at the table is sort of a best practice in transit nationwide. And something that's why the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council was formed in '82, was to make sure that writers had a say, or at least a very public say. So I thank the Transportation Committee for your efforts. You've been a tremendous partner of transit, tremendous partner of all things roads and users. And thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Doug. And I appreciate you highlighting those things. We're really lucky to have, and I know Chance said he's jealous of New Haven and BRT there. I think what the goal is that we can expand it, certainly. And we're talking about Hartford Bus Rapid Transit, expanding that. And so I think we'll see the future's looking good. Let's just say that. We just have to continue to fight for and secure the funding necessary. So I'm hopeful that we can continue to do that. We've got great partners in the Connecticut Public Transportation Council, as well as CONDOT working with us and working with our federal partners to really move Connecticut forward and keep connecting people, places, and things. So thank you all. I know we really appreciate you taking the time, especially in these crazy weather days and unusual circumstances. And I know we had to push your hearing, this informational hearing, back a bit. So it was a bit off schedule, but really grateful to you all for being here and for serving on the Connecticut Public Transportation Council. Do you want any words in closing?
I just want to say thank you to each of you for advocating, as you always do, in such a strong and articulate way. And we hear you loud and clear. And I look forward to more of our work together.
Thanks so much. And with that, we'll adjourn this informational, go into our next. Thanks so much.
Thank you.